Why there's a little delay there? Because I was getting my hair sprayed.
Oh.
That's the way TV works, right?
Looks great, Dagan.
Shiny and flyaways. That's what we try to prevent.
I've had a flyaway here like all morning. I just can't get out of my
eyes.
See,
this is what I think I can say this for the three of us. I can't believe that we work in industries where we have to wear makeup every day and worry about like flyaways. I can't believe it. Thank you, ladies. Good to see you both. Good morning. I'm Dagan McDowell in for Maria Bartiromo. It's Wednesday, December 20th. Your top stories at 6 a.m. Eastern. The Senate making history. Republicans approving the largest overhaul of our country's tax system in about 30 years early this morning.
I'm a little surprised the Democrats all decided voting against middle-class tax relief and making American businesses more competitive was a smart vote. And that's an argument we're more than happy to have.
83% of the middle class will either pay more in taxes or get little but crumbs. Is that this great bill that's helping the middle class? Absolutely not.
The House will vote on the bill later today, likely sending it to President Trump's desk to sign. The House originally did pass it yesterday, but there was a procedural snag that has forced a second vote. It was a snag over in the Senate. Following the passage in the Senate, futures are showing this happening in the markets. We had a slight pullback in the Dow yesterday, off about 37 points, but we're seeing possibly new all-time highs for all your major market gauges. By the way, you have highs on the transports earlier in the week, on the Russell 2000. Literally every single market gauge in the U.S. has been moving in sync on the optimism from this tax reform package. Over in Europe, checking on England, France, and Germany, we have losses across the board, although slight. All markets there down less than about 0.2%. In Asia, overnight, stocks mostly lower as well. The Nikkei in Japan up ever so slightly. ISIS threatening America. The terror group warning of a New Year's Eve attack. The latest as New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announces heightened security measures for the holidays. Uber dealt a blow in Europe. The EU's top court has ruled that the ride-sharing company is a taxi service and should be regulated as such. We break down the major implications of that ruling. And what can Brown do for Tesla? The details as UPS delivers a big bet on the company's electric semi-truck. And Diddy making moves to be the top cat down in Carolina. The music mogul reportedly meeting with investors in his bid to buy the Panthers. How the team could soon have a new owner. All of that and so much more coming up this morning. Fox News correspondent Leah Gabriel, Benchmark managing partner Kevin Kelly, and Forbes media chairman, former Republican presidential candidate Steve Forbes. When you walked in this morning, I went, I am so glad you're here. Any day, but particularly this day, Mr. Forbes.
Well, good to be with you. Thank you.
Because we have the same feeling about this tax cut package. But if you listen to the Democrats, we're going to hell. That's pretty much the message. The country's going to hell. It's thievery, and I just say poppycock to that. So we're going to get into that immediately.
Yeah, it's a good word to use on a family channel.
Yes. I have an entire lexicon of things like that, like hooey and poppycock and balderdash. So I will break all of that out this morning.
I think I've heard you call the Democrats when it's come to this plan nincompoops.
No,
too,
I've
as
called
well.
it. You know what? I actually called the Republicans nincompoops.
Oh, that's what it
As they were putting this together.
Another old word is knuckleheads.
Knuckleheads. This is what we're going to talk about, though. That why do people not yet feel good about this tax reform? Yeah. Part of it is the problem of how they put it together. So we're going to talk about that in 2 seconds. I just want to tease our guests that are coming up. Illinois Congressman Peter Roskam, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andy Napolitano, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, former Republican presidential candidate Herman Cain, and administrator of the Small Business Administration, Linda McMahon. There's a lot in this package for small businesses as well. But first, on the verge of a big tax victory, Republicans are set to give their final approval to a sweeping tax overhaul today after the Senate passed the plan in a late-night vote. House leaders are scheduled a final vote this morning on the plan, ready to send it to President Trump's desk to sign it into law. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that both American businesses and individual taxpayers will see the benefits.
We've had 2 quarters in a row of 3% growth. Stock market is up. Optimism is high. Coupled with this tax reform, America is ready to start performing as it should have for a number of years.
The president congratulating lawmakers on Twitter, writing, "The United States Senate just passed the biggest in history tax cut and reform bill. Terrible individual mandate, Obamacare, repealed. Goes to the House tomorrow morning for a final vote. If approved, there will be a news conference at the White House at approximately 1 p.m. Steve Forbes, we're on the precipice of passing this first major tax overhaul. The Wall Street Journal is saying, certainly on the business side, it actually does more in some ways than the '86 tax reform did in terms of reforming corporate taxes.
Yeah, the big news is on the business side, reducing the corporate rate down to 21. On pass-throughs, that is partnerships, S-corps, and the like, which is how most American businesses are organized for tax purposes. They got that rate down, looks like 29.6. We'll have to see the final details on that. Overseas earnings no longer being penalized and bringing some of that cash back home, instant expensing. So if there are no sleepers in this bill, and the market, I think, would have ferreted them out by now, they did good on that side. The individual side is where they got to do work the next time. And I hope today...
When's the next time? When is that?
Well, this is what they should announce today, that, oh, yes, it's great history since 1986 and all that good stuff. What they should also announce is this is a down payment. This is the first of many big tax cuts to come. Give people anticipation, especially on the individual side. We're going to keep slashing taxes because you, the Americans, create the resources and can employ them better than Washington bureaucrats.
I think the question, though, for many, though, is that really possible if you look at the deficit and the debt? We're at $20 trillion in debt, and people consider that a national security issue. So can you? Is it really feasible to keep lowering
what history shows, experience shows, is the only way you get a balanced budget, if you want that, is with a booming economy.
Right.
Late 1960s, Kennedy tax cuts. Finally in the 90s, after the Cold War and Reagan's Cold War victory, massive tax cuts. So if you want to get the Washington's fiscal situation under control, you have to have an economy where people feel good.
On that note, Steve, the budget deficit has grown in the last 2 years. Spending has gone up, but not that much. It's because revenues haven't been growing. In the most recent fiscal year, revenue only grew at 1%. And in an expansion, it should be growing at 3 to 5%, but this recovery, this growth period in American history has been so weak because of regulations and because of flawed tax code, quite frankly.
Yeah, the last decade has had the worst economic growth since the 1930s. And so that's why I think even deregulation sounds boring, but regulations are a tax. And the fact they're removing regulations, Washington isn't getting up each morning figuring out how to make life more miserable for business, has already had an impact. And you're going to see now that this thing is going to be actually in reality, you're going to see much more investment. And what Democrats refuse to recognize is if you want a higher standard of living, you have to have people making investments, creating those new products and services, those better paying jobs. And one of the things they should emphasize is not just you're going to keep more of what you now earn, but your earnings, your pay is going to go up.
Thank you.
These investments
Thank you
in.
to all of these Democrats. Not one Democrat voted for this plan, and I tweeted this out earlier. More than 80% of people, of taxpayers in this country, at least in the first year, are going to get a tax cut. They're going to see more money in their paycheck. They're going to get to keep more of the money that they earned. So try running on that, because the Democrats think that people, I mean, the messaging is that, again, the country, that this is a scam, whatever language that you want to pick. But again, try running on giving people more of their money.
Well, the problem is the Democrats don't have any right to critique this plan because none of them voted for it. We're limited to $1.5 trillion. We've seen under the previous administration that they didn't even want to tackle deficit. So we're in this vicious circle where all of a sudden now the Democrats have found religion when it comes to deficits, but at the detriment of the American people that actually need strong growth. They've been under the thumb of rules and regulations, including the Obamacare, as President Trump has alluded to. But I think the important thing to take away from this is that it's cheaper for companies to invest here in the United States than it is abroad, right? But there was a detriment for them to invest here when you could have foreign corporations come in and compete at a lower tax rate. And look over at the UK, right? 20% corporate tax rate that they're going to take to 17.5%. We are nowhere near competitive. We have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world.
Well, now that changes today.
How do you get companies to invest here? You unleash prosperity through property, plant, equipment, where they can reinvest at a 21% rate.
One of the things Republicans should learn from this is get rid of this constraint from the Congressional Budget Office, these fake numbers, projections out 10 years that assume the tax cuts don't do much for the economy. Get rid of that. Assume 3.5% growth, and by golly, have really muscular tax cuts. In the future.
I need to get to this. While this is what I want to get your answer on this, and it goes to the way that the Democrats have been messaging this. While markets are optimistic about this tax plan, business owners and operators are optimistic. It remains unpopular with the American people. Actually, it's become more unpopular. This is a new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll that found 41% of Americans say that the tax plan is a bad idea. Just 24% of it say it's a good idea. Top Republicans insist the numbers will shift in the coming months. Watch this.
My view of this, if we can't sell this to the American people, we ought to go into another line of work. I think this is an important accomplishment for the country that people will value and appreciate, but obviously it requires us continuing this discussion.
People are out there on TV telling mistruths, disguising the facts of this thing. That's going to make it unpopular. But when we get this done, when people see their withholding improving, when they see the jobs occurring, when they see bigger paychecks, a fairer tax system, a simpler tax code, that's what's going to produce the results.
Steve, this is Richard Rubin is the reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and he points out, and I did as well on Twitter, 80% in the first year, 80% of households get a tax cut, at least, if not more than that. But 17% of people think they're getting tax cuts. That is unbelievable. But to the Democrats who are saying it's a scam, Tom Perez, the head of the DNC, said in his statement taxes are going up. Yeah, taxes are going up for people when these tax cuts expire 8 or 10 years from now. That's a lie. The American people are being told lies by the Democrats. But I say to them, I say to these liberals who are messaging this, you know what? People are going to get more money back. They're going to see money in their paychecks. So good luck with that.
One of the problems with the mainstream media is they're located in New York and California. Many of them won't see a tax cut because of the loss of state and local deductions. So in their little world, this thing doesn't look so good. They forget there's the rest of the country. And one of the things Republicans have got to do is more messaging, not just say the results will speak for themselves, but explain to people why this is better, and also start talking about payroll reform. You know, 6 years ago, they allowed for a couple of years people to keep their first 2 points on the Social Security tax. So even if you didn't pay income tax, which many Americans don't, you got a higher paycheck. So they should put that on the table, say if we get reelected, everyone who works is going to get another tax cut. Start throwing out things for the future.
We're going to argue about that because payroll tax, well, the payroll tax goes to fund a benefit. It goes to fund Social Security and Medicare.
But the fact of the matter is they use the general budget when they need it, and you use this for political purposes to make sure everyone feels it for a couple of years, and you do more muscular tax cuts. So it's part of a plan. Instead of this kiddie credit, which was just giveaway for people with babies.
We have to go. But I want to point something out. When in this country did we start believing that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Democrats make better decisions with our money? This is my money. I think I make better decisions about my life, my health, and my money than those elected officials who have their heels dug in
Even
down in
Warren
D.C.
Buffett's a Democrat, I'll trust him more than Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you. Coming up, a big blow for Uber in Europe. A new ruling says that the company should be regulated like taxis. What it means for drivers and users of the popular ride-sharing app. Plus, Sean Diddy Combs reportedly taking another step in his effort to buy the Carolina Panthers. New details on how Colin Kaepernick might be involved.
I'll be home for Christmas. You can plan on me.
This breaking news overnight, the EU dealing a major setback to Uber. Lauren Simonetti has the details. Lauren?
Hey, Dagan, the European Court of Justice ruling that Uber should be regulated as a taxi company and not as a digital service. Uber has been trying to use courts to reduce their regulatory oversight. Uber claims it is an app so it can connect drivers with passengers that they pick up. And Uber adds that the ruling should not have an immediate impact on how it operates in Europe. Shares, well, It's not a publicly traded company, or at least not yet. UPS ordering 125 of Tesla's all-electric semi-trucks. This is the largest public order for the big rig thus far. The Tesla trucks will cost about $200,000 each. Tesla expects them to be in production by 2019. This is when we're going to show you shares of Tesla. They're up 1.1% at $334.92 in pre-market trading. Well, Sean Diddy Combs, or Diddy, that's what his name is these days, serious about buying the Carolina Panthers. Yahoo Sports is reporting that Diddy is huddling with potential investors, hoping to put together an ownership group. Those efforts are expected to include Colin Kaepernick. He and Diddy, according to the report, had a conversation, and they discussed the former NFL quarterback's role in any potential deal. Panthers owner Jerry Richardson announced that he would be putting the franchise up for sale amid sexual and racial misconduct allegations. Dagan?
Thank you, Lauren.
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting. Well, getting back to the Uber situation, that most of the rules and regulations that come on these technology companies, whether it's Google or Uber or any other, is coming from Europe. And I think that's going to be a big theme going into next year. I think there's going to be a lot of rules and regulations coming, especially to Facebook. So I think that's pretty telling. You know, we're starting to see the ripples now. We'll feel the effects next year.
Yeah, and also shows why Britain pulled out of the EU, is that they're very anti-growth, anti-innovation, always have this guild medieval mentality of something new comes along, we must crush it and control it. And you're right, though, in this country, the big tech companies don't realize they're going into a political buzzsaw because of their alleged power. And they haven't done, you know, in the old days, back before any of you were born, the old AT&T monopoly survived as long as it did, because it made sure everyone was serviced. Every politician got free phone, not free phone service during the campaign, but they got the phone service. Every newspaper had an ad. They covered all their bases. These tech companies, especially Google and Facebook, discriminating against conservatives on what they are allowed to post. That stuff is going to get a political backlash, and I wish they'd wake up to it.
I think that they are waking up. I think that they are waking up, that they realize the power of Washington and what might be brought to bear on them unless
Well, they're the biggest donors.
They're still playing with the conservatives.
They're the biggest donors to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and so they're actually enabling this, and so they're kind of blinded by kind of their friends in Washington that aren't really going to be there to help them out.
We'll see
they have to realize there are two parties in this country.
Yeah.
We'll see their reaction to this tax reform, because it's going to feel good to a lot of them. Coming up, ISIS threatening attacks here and in Europe over the holiday season. The latest target, New Year's Eve, how officials here in New York City are stepping up security a week after that subway bomb blast. And the divide in the fight against opioid abuse, the overdose antidote helping victims, but it may also put law enforcement at risk. The controversy ahead. A new terror warning, ISIS releasing several disturbing propaganda posters threatening attacks over the holiday season. The latest targets, New Year's Eve. This comes a week and a half after an attempted suicide bombing in New York City. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo has announced heightened security measures over the holidays, including increased personnel, bomb-sniffing dogs, and even radiation detectors. Joining us this morning is national security analyst at the Clarion Project, professor of counterterrorism at Liberty University down in Lynchburg, Virginia, Ryan Morrow. Ryan, what do you make of this?
Well, of course ISIS is going to be saying something like this. And for me, what the message should be is, even if they were to succeed in carrying out an attack, the so-called lone wolf that doesn't actually exist, one guy goes off and he kills some people, overall, they're still a bunch of losers. 96% of their caliphate has been destroyed. We need to start weaponizing Trump's trolling. I mean, make fun of them for how many dumb things that they do. And for a group that claims that Allah is blessing them and on their side, well, actually, it kind of looks like if their Allah exists, he's on our side, because we're really killing him.
You know, Ryan, I think you make such a good point, because as ISIS has lost ground in the Middle East, essentially what it's trying to establish is a cyber caliphate. And so it's trying to influence people who are crazy. A lot of these people who are lone wolf attackers don't really have a real attachment to terrorist groups overseas, as you know. And instead what they're trying to do is reach people who are angry, people who want to take who want to take that anger and hate out on people and then essentially get to them through the internet. But when you look at terror attacks in places like New York City, these lone wolf attacks, what's so difficult is trying to identify them ahead of time. So you have some 3,000 police officers patrolling down in the subway systems, for example, in New York each day. But what they're really having to be able to do is assess people. So how can people better be able to assess people, our officers and just people on the streets, to see if maybe they're, have those assessments in mind in case they see something and then they should say something?
Sure. Great question. Well, for the average civilian, it's just looking at something like a backpack that's placed somewhere, the kind of obvious things that make you uncomfortable reporting that type of thing. For law enforcement, I do a lot of training of law enforcement, and what I'll teach them is look for these dramatic overhauls in someone's personality, because that's what the radicalization process looks like. Obsession. They become obsessed with the ideology. They usually start alienating their friends and family because they become real judgmental. But I would say that when you look into the backgrounds of these folks, yes, they may not initially have connections to a terrorist group per se, but they will have connections to a supposedly nonviolent extremist movement. You look far back into where these initial ideas kind of incubate, and you'll see connections to groups around the world that are considered moderate by comparison, but still radical and repulsive, and that's where I think our attention should lie, and that's why I think that Congress really needs to investigate how the Obama administration impeded counterterrorism investigations and prosecutions, because that's the foundation where this begins. It's not about political points. It's about figuring out where these mistakes were made and going back and fixing them.
One of the things that happened a few years ago was the New York Police Department, which had a good intelligence operation. Then politically they thwarted it. Is that back up to full speed again?
Not really, because what happens is when something like that occurs, you influence the culture. And so you can still have some investigations that are going on the street level, but those specific programs that were shut down, even if you were to revive them, it was
surveillance of Muslim communities and mosques, just trying to figure out if there was a would-be terrorist, where the individual was working, where the individual might be living basically in secret. But do you think New Yorkers are angry? New Yorkers are angry that in 14 months we've had 3 terror attacks, 8 people killed over near the West Side Highway on a bike path. And then after the fact, they put up concrete barricades, some of which are decorated for Christmas. Right. People are irritated. They're angry. They're, you know what? And what is New York going to do about it?
Well, there were a few different programs that were conflated, but the biggest amount of lying that went on in the media and also pushed by certain activist organizations was this idea that the NYPD was just spying on Muslims for simply being Muslim. If you look at the stuff that real resources were put into, there were always indications of extremism, such as classes on how to disarm police if you get into a fight with cops. Right. That's a sign of extremism. Start there. Believe it or not, those type of indicators are all over the place, and that's where you start. And if you look at this as an ideological insurgency, not a criminal intelligence problem, not even a terrorism problem, but an ideological insurgency, and you say, what is the infrastructure for this problem? Start there. You'll find the bad guys. It just requires some political incorrectness.
Ryan, good to see you. Thank you so much. Ryan Mauro, again, be vigilant. Be vigilant. Coming up, Facebook expanding the use of its facial recognition, but is raising new concerns over privacy. And do you have one of the most popular computer passwords of the year? We'll tell you why that's not a good thing.
Sleigh bells ring, are you listening? In the lane, snow is...
Good morning. I'm Daga McDowell in from Maria Bartiromo. It's Wednesday, December 20th. Your top story is at 6:30 a.m. Eastern. Clearing the final hurdles to tax reform. The Senate burning the midnight oil to pass the largest tax code overhaul in 3 decades. The vote split straight down party lines. Not one single Democrat defecting in support of this bill.
I think every Democrat who votes against this, and apparently that's all of them in the House and Senate, are saying, in effect, we're satisfied with where we are. They're simply not interested in doing the kinds of things that economists believe will get the country growing again.
There was no inclusion of Democrats in this process. When the senator says, we want to give tax cut, frankly, we want to give a tax cut as well.
The House will vote on the updated bill today, likely sending it to the president's desk. Optimism over tax reform still fueling these markets. Futures are showing gains across the board, 75-point gain on the Dow futures right now. But it has been an incredible year for stocks. Dow was down about 37 points yesterday, but we're seeing that optimism return. In Europe, we have losses across the board in England, France, and Germany, and it seems like the selling's picking up a little bit of steam in France and Germany right now. In Asia, overnight stocks mostly lower as well, with a slight gain for the Nikkei in Japan. Tragedy in Mexico. A tour bus carrying American cruise ship passengers crashes, killing at least 12 people. We have the latest from that investigation ahead. The opioid epidemic striking the workplace. Alcohol and drug-related overdoses at work spiked to new levels. How the government is working to combat that growing health crisis. And putting the face in Facebook, the social media site sparking privacy concerns with new facial recognition technology. Why the company says it added the feature ahead. And these aren't the passwords you're looking for. Star Wars makes its debut on the annual list of the worst passwords. We'll let you know what took the top spot this year. But to our top story this half hour, the opioid epidemic hitting the workplace. According to a new report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, unintentional drug and alcohol overdose deaths at work spiked 32% in 2016. The number tripling since the Bureau began compiling data back in 2011. Joining us this morning is Opiant Pharmaceuticals CEO, Dr. Roger Crystal. Doctor, your company develops the easy-to-use overdose antidote, Narcan, which is a nasal spray. So you're at the forefront of combating this opioid epidemic. What do you think of these new statistics?
For me, given my background, this really isn't a surprise, actually, unfortunately. The opioid crisis has just continued to grow. I'm from the UK originally and trained as a surgeon, and there those types of numbers don't yet exist. But part of that, and in fact the big driver of that, has been, unfortunately, in the past, the overprescribing of opioid painkillers, and that's something that we need to address as a country, alongside treating all these people who are unfortunately addicted to opioids and alcohol.
Aren't we already doing that in terms of really reining in the amount of opioids prescribed? I mean, I personally experience it with all my doctors. You have dental surgery. They do not give you Vicodin any longer. In terms of even at the state level, it is very, very hard to get a prescription for anything as powerful as like oxycodone or OxyContin at this point.
That's true that there are some measures in place already, so I hope we will see a reduction. I will say that even as recently as last year, there were still over 200 million opioid prescriptions made out to approximately 20 million people. So this is a huge issue. And that doesn't also address the 2.5 million opioid addicts who we have in this country already. So we're really not there yet, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so getting back to your product and what you guys do, you guys have a nasal spray that people that are currently addicted to heroin take, or can you explain to us the product, and you've got FDA approval, and kind of walk us through what you guys are doing?
So the product is called the Narcan nasal spray, and this saves lives if someone were to overdose from an opioid. And when we say opioids, yes, correct, it is something like heroin or fentanyl, unfortunately, we see here now, but also just routine normal painkillers such as OxyContin and Vicodin. And whilst I agree that they are being prescribed less, they are still overprescribed, and it's not for someone who's even necessarily an addict. I'm in good health. I don't abuse opioids. If my dentist were to prescribe me OxyContin, I would still be at risk of an opioid overdose, and therefore it would potentially be prudent for me to be prescribed the Narcan nasal spray alongside any opioid as a just-in-case measure.
Now, I just want to get to why you're talking about Narcan. There was a report recently that police departments are split over the use of Narcan, that some police officials are talking about lack of resources for obtaining, maintaining, and tracking supplies, and for training in and when how to use it. Are you seeing any pushback from police departments when they encounter rescue squads, ambulance services, paramedics, when they encounter people who have overdosed, of them using Narcan?
The feedback from ourselves and from our partners Adapt Pharma as well is that there's no real pushback in terms of not wanting to receive the Narcan nasal spray. It's easy to use, it saves lives, it's been FDA approved. So there's a real gratitude when they finally can get hold of it, because actually it's something that people are then able to use and save lives. The challenge about resources, that is more of a broader issue about funding.
That's true for some, but I know that Sheriff Jones in Butler County, Ohio, does not want his officers carrying this, and it's because, for one thing, they say that, you know, law enforcement officials are supposed to be able to enforce the law, not end up basically treating people who are going to overdose again and again, and they see these repeat offenders. You know, they also say that sometimes people come to and then they actually assault the person who was trying to help them. There was an incident of that in Middletown where an injured firefighter was injured, and so you look at this and you go, a firefighter is supposed to be fighting fires. Yeah, they do, you know, give emergency medical help as well, but gosh, like, should they be carrying this around and then being put in this position where they're expending their duties to something that they really are not supposed to be doing?
Well, that represents a vast minority of people, and certainly the police officer you mentioned is very outspoken on that, but that's particularly rare. The emergency responders in general, that is their responsibility overall, is to respond to an emergency. Why? To ultimately save lives. And this is a very successful way of saving a life if given appropriately. And people, if they get the right training, should absolutely be well handled to do so.
Your company got some good news about the feasibility of a heroin vaccine that's been in the works. Tell us about that.
So this is an early stage program that we're very fortunate to have partnered with the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research and NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So we have this program, and we got some recent news that's going to be published around the feasibility of this heroin vaccine. It's showing that not only does the vaccine seem to work in an animal model against heroin, but also activity against some of these opioid painkillers as well. So we're very encouraged by that. We also have the data to show that this can potentially be scaled up and therefore truly manufactured on a commercial level once it gets into the clinic. So this is very important even at this stage when we're thinking about this as a proper product to get out there.
Can we get a balance in pain management? As you know, 15 years ago, the rap against the medical profession was they weren't doing enough for people in pain, which led to the part of the reasons we have the crisis today. Yeah. What is the balance?
The balance is a tough one to strike, and I talk about my experience in the UK as a surgeon there, and by no means is the UK perfect at all. We probably didn't prescribe sufficient analgesia. The balance really to think about how we address that is starting off in medical schools, and I say medical, not just MD medical, but dental schools and anyone else who's interfacing with patients who are in pain. Pain just doesn't need to be addressed with painkillers. I think that's the first thing that's really important to think about here. Often physical therapy can be extremely helpful, and in fact patients need to understand that some pain isn't in fact a bad thing if they are reassured psychologically that this is part of healing.
But the backlash has been toward, and I speak from personal experience, family experience, that people who are in critical pain, who need opioids, who need OxyContin, who need oxycodone, who are fighting stage 4 bone cancer, it is incredibly difficult now to get prescriptions refilled, that you have to have and the supplies they give you a very short supply, but these are people who literally can't get addicted because of the pain levels they're experiencing. These are deadly diseases and they're just trying to manage their pain, but it's incredibly difficult now for these people to go. You have to drive my mother has to drive 2 hours to get a paper prescription from her doctor every couple of weeks, literally.
No, absolutely, and that's very unfortunate, and the fact that people who generally do require opioids potentially are finding it harder to get access. I absolutely sympathize tremendously in that situation. The issue we have is the vast majority of people probably ought not to be on opioids in the first place. Right. I mean, that's what's so striking.
Well, therein lies the personal responsibility. Is I have conversations with friends and family all the time that if a doctor ever offers to give you an opioid, you say no. I just had a tooth pulled. I don't need Vicodin for that. And people are hesitant now, I think at least through the communication through the media, people are hesitant to take opioids at all because they know they're so highly addictive. I mean, it doesn't take much for some people to become chronically addicted to the point that they can't stop taking it.
Absolutely, and the issue that we have here is that not everyone is so willing to challenge their doctor, and actually it's a multifaceted approach. So it's the historical marketing of drugs, it's the fact that doctors have been overprescribing, it's the fact that patients aren't as empowered as perhaps they have been. So it's very difficult to say there's one specific air of responsibility, but recognizing we have this crisis. We need to do something about it. Part of it is to stop the overprescribing and misprescribing of opioids, and for where we play a role as a company is to treat addictions themselves. For anyone who's an opioid addict, the sooner you can get on definitive medical care and the longer you can receive medical treatment, the far greater the likelihood of not relapsing and actually going into long-term recovery. And that's what we're committed to.
Dr. Crystal, it's good to see you. Dr. Roger Crystal, thank you so much for being here. Coming up, Delta says pay up. The airline calling on officials at Atlanta's airport for compensation after the massive power outage caused Delta to lose millions of dollars in revenue because thousands of flights had to be canceled. And fit to be tied, shares of the popular online retailer Stitch Fix tumbling after its first earnings report as a public company. The details are next. Welcome back. Futures reporting to a higher open, 78-point gain on the Dow futures right now. We're looking at a few stocks on the move. Stitch Fix shares unraveling in pre-market following its first earnings report since its IPO. The personalized apparel company reporting strong customer gains, but it only narrowly beat profit expectations because of expansion cost. The company has also struggled to convince investors it can keep up the growth. Shares are down 12% in pre-market trading. And can the BlackBerry turnaround continue? The former smartphone giant set to report its third quarter earnings before the bell today. Analysts are expecting revenue of about $215 million. The company has recently pivoted away from phones to cybersecurity software. BlackBerry shares are up nearly 60% so far this year. 12 people are dead after a tour bus crashes in Mexico. Lauren Simonetti has the details. Lauren?
Such a terrible story, Dagan. The bus was carrying cruise ship passengers on an excursion in Mexico when it flipped over on a narrow highway yesterday, killing 12 people. 20 others injured, including 7 Americans. Royal Caribbean says passengers from 2 of its ships were on that bus. Investigators now working to figure out what caused the crash. Well, Delta wants some money back. The airline is seeking to be repaid for lost revenue after Sunday's power outage at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta. Delta CEO Ed Bastian says the airline may have lost between $25 and $50 million of revenue as a result, and he plans to talk to both the airport as well as Georgia Power. That outage caused Delta to cancel about 1,400 flights, and they also had to put stranded passengers up in hotel rooms. Hartsfield-Jackson is Delta's main hub. Taking a look at shares of the company this year, up about 13%. And can you believe that in 2017, people are still using password as their password? Here is the list of this year's most common passwords. We'll start with number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Really, I swear. In second place is password for the 4th year in a row. The most common password of the year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't even know how this is possible because many websites, at least the ones I use, make you change your password, and then you have to have the capital letter, the number, the symbol that you can't remember it, so you're constantly changing it. Anyway, for those of you who still use password, we have some new passwords that you might want to change to. None of these are good, but they are popular. Let Me In, Monkey, and Star Wars made the list of the most common new passwords. Dagan, what are your passwords?
I can't even remember. You know what? I can't even remember them. I only know them on the QWERTY keyboard by the keystrokes because it's never, you're not supposed to actually use a word ever. No word in the dictionary. There should never be a word in your password.
Impossible to remember.
Can I just say that I hope that one of the brain trusts of the Democratic Party, John Podesta, watched this segment because his password for his email, which WikiLeaks got, was password and the A was the at symbol. So hopefully he watches this. He knows not. Hopefully he didn't change it to Let Me In or Monkey or Star Wars.
Here's
but I hope he's.
Here's the password for Democrats: tax cuts.
Right, and you do team little at cuts, right?
It's like the hashtag. If you put in hashtag tax, if you're going to tweet, the first thing that comes up is tax cut scam, and it just makes me so angry because it's not a. The Democrats weren't involved in it. That doesn't mean it's a scam.
No.
But that's good marketing.
No, it's a scam when you get to keep more of your own money. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but all hat,
Belongs to Washington.
all hat, no cattle is what that is. Good marketing, yeah, good words, no action. Coming up, Control or Creepy, Facebook's expanded facial recognition feature will alert you if your picture is posted to the social media site, even if you're not tagged in it. Facebook raising new privacy concerns. The company expanding its facial recognition technology. It will now alert you if your photo is posted to the social media site, even if you're not tagged in it. But Facebook has a different spin. Jerry Willis is here with the details. I don't think this sounds like the worst idea, actually.
It doesn't, and they're not saying that at all, that we're going to hurt your privacy. In fact, they're saying 180 degrees the opposite. Here's what they say. If someone uploads a photo of your face to Facebook, the company usually knows that it's you thanks to facial recognition technology. Facebook will now alert people that a friend or a friend of a friend, whoever, uploaded a photo of them, even if they haven't been tagged in the picture. It's what Facebook says. We're doing this to prevent people from impersonating others on Facebook. Facebook says it has no plans to use facial recognition to enhance ads targeting. That's the first thing I thought of. This has something to do with advertising, like showing you more newsfeed posts from friends who post untagged photos of you, or ads related to locations where you appear in untagged photos. For example, if you're in somebody's profile photo, which is always public, you'll always be notified. For other photos, though, you'll only get notified if you're in the audience for that photo, so as to protect the uploader's privacy and not alert you about photos you're not allowed to see. Facebook says the feature is designed to give people more control and make them feel safer, because that's the ultimate goal in this society, apparently, is that everybody feels safe.
Well, impersonation is a huge problem on Facebook. And I had somebody was on air with us years ago and literally took, I'm not joking, more than 30 photos in the building of themselves.
Wow.
And they tagged me in every single photo, and I wasn't in one of them. And it was like the most bizarre thing. And so why would you do that? This is another step in preventing some kind of nonsense like that.
Now, if you're not convinced of this, you can have it undone on your face. There's a way to delete it so that you don't have to be part of this if you don't want to. But I see what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense for people who are worried about impersonation.
Does that delete it from people who are trying to impersonate people? In other words,
it will just alert you. It will tell you that somebody. So
right,
Dagan
like
would have known.
No, but what I mean is, you said there's a way in your security options or something to prevent it from being in effect. So for somebody who wants to try to impersonate somebody else,
go find those
people. They
people.
can figure it out. How to prevent it.
We'll know that something is not right. If something's up, if you start, like, if I have a pimple on my face and I start getting ads, I start getting ads for Clearasil or like proactive face wash, stuff like that. You're like, wait a minute.
Never gets pimples.
Oh, that's not true.
I think this highlights, though, the omnipotent power of Facebook, whether you recognize it or not, because they know you're in the photo. So, whether you're tagged or it's you, or they know who you are, and that's how they track you.
I gave up on privacy a long time ago.
You are the product.
Are you
that's
on
what
Facebook?
it is.
Not just that, but it's a police state.
In a way.
In a way. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Jerry, terrific. Jerry Willis. Still ahead, cell phone use a public health issue. It's what health officials in California are warning. The details are coming up on Mornings with Maria.